when we've created opportunities to where both participants will be following up with one another afterwards. So again, we've got really, really good metrics to be able to say this type of meeting typically results in a follow-up afterwards, or these types of meetings are typically resulting in lower satisfaction rates, for example, that allow us to then really get into the fine detail and tweak and modify. And then we work with our delegates all through the year as well. So like I say, we have this really fantastic attendee experience team who kind of guide our delegates through their journey at Shoptalk. And what they are able to do is really, have individual conversations with virtually every person who's coming on site to really get a feel for what they're trying to achieve, how easy they're finding it to do, all of those bits and pieces that allow us to shape in the run up to the show, but then also allow us to take that away and build better next time.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have the global president at Shoptalk. I'm assuming everyone listening here has either been to a Shoptalk or has heard about it before. So welcome, Sophie, to the show. Really excited to have you.
Really nice to be with you, Kailin.
Awesome. Well, Sophie, when I was doing research for the show, I saw that you have a bit of fintech experience. You have some additional experience. Maybe talk to us a bit about your career journey and how you ended up heading such a large conference in the e-com space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a relative newcomer actually into e-com. I've been at Shoptalk for 2 years, just about. I started out my career in events world. I've always been a kind of an events person or a tech person. So I've kind of gone from either tech events to I've been worked with a couple of startups, worked in a VC for a while, and then I've worked on the event side in tech events as well. So I kind of tech and events seems to be the spiral that I keep heading into. I ran Money 2020 Europe, which is a very large fintech show in Amsterdam for about 6 years before joining Shoptalk. So this seems to be my happy place, the intersection between tech and events. And I'm very excited to be in the e-commerce space now, which I think has been my favorite of all of the tech sectors that I've worked in.
Amazing. And I think we were chatting about it a bit before the show, but prior to this year, we had never invested in events before. I told a joke a bit about how I wasn't actually a big believer in events prior to this year. But the first thing that when our head of marketing, head of sales kind of lobbied me on sponsoring a couple of events this year, they all said, hey, we did our research. We have to go to Shoptalk. It has to be Shoptalk. So you guys are kind of the premier event, candidly, or one of the many events in retail. Maybe talk to us a bit about how you feel like you guys got there. What do you think sets Shoptalk apart? I feel like I could go to a different conference every week if I tried to in retail. So why you guys and why has it been so successful in your own words?
Yeah, so Shoptalk's actually a relatively young brand. So we've only been going since 2016. So actually, for us, we've grown very, very quickly. We do about 10,000 attendees come to Shoptalk Spring in Las Vegas every year. But that's been relatively quick to build. And I think it's because the shows have this really beautiful blend of incredible content with, very senior, very, very expert speakers, which is kind of a really, really important part. We have a really, really highly curated networking program that allows people to get, really, really straight into, of all those 10,000 people, who do you need to get in front of, and to really guarantee ahead of time that that you're going to meet the people you need to meet, which is another element. And then kind of going across the entire thing, we like to think of ourselves as kind of experience curators also, and we love to make sure that people have a really fantastic time at the show while they're here. You'll hear that I use the word show when I talk about Shoptalk. We don't say conference, we don't say trade show. We think of ourselves as a show because for us, it's really, really important that we kind of curate the experience that allows people to get into a relaxed frame of mind that allows them to really, really capitalize on all of the opportunities that are available to them in that week. And then the last part, I think, is just the density of the events. So the biggest problem we have in building them actually is we have so much that we need to try and cram into the 3 days of the show. So actually that's the biggest challenge we have every year is we want to add new pieces to the show. And as we start to look at the schedule, we think, oh God, we're really only giving people 10 minutes to have lunch. Like, how is that going to work? Or because we've got so many pieces to the puzzle that need to happen in those 3 days. So it's really a case of trying to give people that experience of, what it's like to do 3 months of business in 3 days. That's the experience we're trying to create.
I love that. I think it makes a ton of sense. And maybe talk to us a bit about how your team actually goes about curating the content, because I think you nailed it. Like, you guys have expert panels in very relevant topics, and it's just tactical enough where you leave kind of saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do to influence my KPIs for next week, next month. But it's also bigger picture enough where you can kind of see past your day-to-day tasks. Maybe talk to us a bit about how your team actually goes about curating, choosing speakers, and curating the content.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing to say is that the content team who work on Shoptalk, they are all industry folks. So they've all come out of the retail space. Mostly they are ex-analysts. So they're, really deeply embedded in the industry. They have fantastic networks. For each of the shows, we have an advisory board, which is, a bunch of really senior faces who are prepared to give us very, very honest feedback about how we're doing, but also who are prepared to be very, very honest about the good, bad, and ugly of their roles and what they're finding, trend-wise, who they're being pitched by, all of that kind of stuff, which gives us a, really, really amazing insight into just, the realities of some of those really senior folks' roles. We do about, between the content team that I have, they do about 1,000 research calls a year across the shows that we run. So they're in this kind of constant cycle of really, really understanding, from across all different parts of the industry, what people are seeing and what they're hearing and what's important to them, where they're finding challenges, and really kind of bring that all together. We're in this kind of really lovely space in Shoptalk Research, sit in this central hub position where, we have friends and customers in all different parts of the world and the different parts of the industry. And we sit in this, lovely position where we're able to hear all of that feedback from all of those different places and synthesize it into that agenda. We set the agenda for the shows normally sort of 6 to 8 months out. That's kind of the window. So we're currently going through that process just now for Shoptalk Spring. And then we leave normally about 20% of the agenda that we fill in kind of as we get towards the end to make sure that we're not missing anything that comes in at a very high speed. So, it's amazing that this is only really 2 years ago that this has happened. But just as I was joining Shoptalk, for example, was just kind of on the cusp of ChatGPT launching. And so again, it was, very, very hot topic and had kind of come out of nowhere. Generative AI is obviously now a really, really core part of our agenda and pops up across many, many panels that we run and pops up all the time in a different context. But, we always leave that little bit of space to be able to really, really reflect what's going on in real time. And then, you alluded to it about really trying to get that right blend between stuff that you can go back to the office and use immediately and that kind of that real tangible takeaways and really good case studies of the best instances of people deploying tech or best case studies of people trying new things, experimenting, and really blending that with the ability to take all of that information we've gathered from all of those 1,000 conversations or however many, and to really use that to predict what's going to come down the path. And so really to set the timeline out just that little bit further than most other events do. We're pretty comfortable talking in that sort of 3 to 5 year timeline at Shoptalk in a way that I think, many events don't. And that also means that sometimes we have to be a little bit of the harbinger of doom is probably not the right way of putting it. But, we will kind of call out stuff that we see that we think is going to be really, really big trends that are going to have very, very strong impacts in the industry, and we're willing to call them quite early. So that's kind of the general approach. And we have that great position where, we're able to study funding flows, all of that kind of stuff that gives us just a little bit more insight into what people are going to be seeing that they're not quite seeing yet.
No, it's it really super detailed. Love that. One thing that attracted us to you guys, and something that was really interesting as I was speaking to some friends or clients rather that are kind of friends now that were there on the retail side, is you guys are really good at kind of matching retailers with specific issues to vendors with specific solutions. And it's kind of this like double opt-in process. I'd never seen that before in my life. I don't know how novel that is because I hadn't really gone to too many conferences prior to Shoptalk. But I'm curious, is that something that you guys kind of pioneered in at least the retail space? I'd never seen that before. And we've sponsored a couple of events since and haven't really seen that. So yeah, I'm curious to learn a bit more about that specific way of kind of matching vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. So In quite a lot of industry conferences, it's quite common to have a smallish hosted buyers program. So where you're bringing in, high level buyers, and reimbursing them for their ticket, their travel, all that kind of stuff, and making it possible for them to be there in exchange for them taking meetings with the right suppliers who are the right fit for them. So that's kind of that is a sort of known quantity in events world outside of retail. But I think Shoptalk is the first event in the retail space to have really made that possible for the retailers and brands that we work with, and at the level that we do it. But the thing that's got really exciting about how Shoptalk does networking, I think, is the step forward that we took a couple of years ago from just the sort of smallish hosted buyers program that we used to run, which still facilitated thousands of meetings at every show. But we introduced the bigger scale meetup, which opened it up to the entire audience, not just people who are looking to buy and people who are looking to sell, but actually to the entire Shoptalk community. And through a piece of software that we use, we do some, very, very, very careful matching. What you'll find, and Kailin, you can probably talk to this having done it, or your team having done it, is we don't use AI to do that. We don't do any sort of matchmaking ourselves. And the reason for that is because it's impossible for us to understand the full complexity of anybody's business, right? It would be impossible for me and my team to understand Noibu, for example, and all of the things that make your world tick, and all of the different customer profiles that are important to you, and all of that kind of stuff. But what we do is we do a very, very careful process that takes quite a long time to allow you to find yourselves the right fit and for them to find you. So it takes about 3 weeks to go through that process. So we're going through it currently right now for our Shoptalk Fall show that's coming up in Chicago, and helping the right people find one another. And the result of that is kind of an obscene number of meetings, actually. I mean, you can probably talk to it a little bit of like how it feels to be in that room, but we have 2,000 tables, just over 2,000 tables that we have at the show in Vegas, where we'll be hosting meetings. So that's 2,000 meetings taking place simultaneously. We hosted last year at Shoptalk about 75,000 meetings across the 3 days. So it is really a scale that is quite hard to get your head around. And even now, after 2 years of doing them, we think that that's probably the biggest B2B meetings program in the world for any industry. But the feel of it is something pretty special. So we're very proud of that product. And we have, 1 million case studies of people finding just exactly the right person to speak to as part of that. And we're very proud of it.
What kind of surprised me when we did the first one was a lot of the people that we were speaking to had done a ton of research ahead of time. So they're actually being very intentional about coming to speak to us. And just quick side note, first time I sat in with all those desks, it reminded me of when I was doing my finals in university, because there was all the desks lined up in the gym, basically.
Into the distance. Yeah, absolutely. No, it is very like that. Or, there's a lot of analogies you can use, but actually one of the things that I like telling people as an anecdote about how many tables there are is we always try and get the picture, the one picture of all the tables in use at the same time. And to do that, we actually have to use a drone because you can't get a height otherwise. And even so, we can't still get quite all of them in one go. We did want to fly over with a drone this year to kind of get a video of everything. But yeah, it's a lot of tables.
No, I love that. And there's different types. So when I was there, I met there's some startups, on both the retailer and the merchant and the vendor side. There's some enterprise businesses. Curious, like, how do you guys go about making sure that the right people at the right stage are talking to the right people? Because if you pair a massive enterprise business with a vendor startup, or vice versa, kind of doesn't really work for either of them. So how have you guys gone about like actually aligning the right people at the right time to kind of drive those synergistic conversations versus two people being like, hey, this is kind of cool, but for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense for us right now on either side?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I think the key to it is that all of the meetings are double opted in. So that means that both sides have expressed the interest. So they've done the full review. Like you say, people do typically come very well armed, and they have reviewed all of the people that they're going to be meeting with and made sure that they're the right fit. We have a very large team internally. They're called our attendee experience team, and their job really is to provide a sort of concierge service for all of our delegates and sort of handhold through that process and be very, very careful and thoughtful about how to guide them to the right people. But ultimately, that's the kind of the secret sauce is that every single meeting, we will never schedule a meeting on your behalf that you haven't actively said, no, this business is right for me. We gather about 95 25 data points for each attendee who comes. So you've got a really, really good range. We can kind of curate the list however, based on whatever it is that you were looking to do. We can cut it and dice it to give you that real sense of, is this the right fit? So with quite a high degree of certainty that you're going to get, mutual value from that conversation. And both sides have agreed, yes, this is a valuable conversation for us to have. So by the time you sit down at the table, 9 times out of 10, you're sitting with somebody who you can have a great conversation with. And actually we do get that. That's more or less our satisfaction rate with the meetings. It's about 92% satisfaction on an individual meeting level.
I love that. Maybe talk to us a bit about, you mentioned it earlier, you guys don't consider yourself a conference. It's more of a show and more of a thought leadership program or platform rather. How do you continue to make sure that Shoptalk stays relevant and is kind of the industry leader? Like how are you folks thinking about it now that you're kind of running strategy and making sure that we don't over monetize it and kind of kill too much of the value?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really good point. And actually, that point about not over monetizing is a really good one. You might have seen we've actually just sold out on tickets for Shoptalk Fall for exactly that reason, to make sure that we have exactly the right group of people in the room. So yeah, it's a really, really big area of focus for us, is making sure that that audience is super curated and that it's a very, very valuable and rewarding experience for everybody who shows up. It's a huge investment of time. That's the thing that gets talked about very little, actually, I think, is we talk about return on, investment of money, but we don't talk all that often about return of investment of time. And as whether you're a tech person or a retail person, time is your slimmest resource. So, it's a really, really important one to us to make sure that people are getting value in a whole myriad of ways when they come on site. So for us, it's really about making sure that the events are a place that people can do as well as talk, so we create all those opportunities for, listening to great content, for, having those great conversations in the meetings. So it's about unlocking connections and all of that kind of stuff, but also really getting hands-on. So really being able to be a place where you can get hands-on with the next generation of tech. We have, for example, like our store of tomorrow that we do at Grocery Shop that allows you to really see and feel what's happening. But our goal, really, our mission, I would say, is that for every single Shoptalk show that we run, we want the world to feel different coming out of that show than it did going in. That's kind of how we build the shows, and that's how the standard that we hold ourselves to. So whether it goes for the conversations that are happening on the stages, whether it goes for the conversations that we're curating elsewhere in the room, or the other opportunities we have and that we create to bring people together in different ways, we really want to see that the partnerships that are built and that the conversations that are had actually move the industry forward. So everything that we do has that in mind. We ask quite a lot of our delegates. I don't know if you felt like that when you attended. You told me that you'd been to other shows in the past, but we do have quite high expectations of people who come to Shoptalk shows. We ask for quite a big investment of time to go through the process of finding the right meetings, but also we do expect that quite active participation on site, and that's really because we know that when we get that from everybody involved, the return on time investment for everybody is very much better. And we also I talked about my team's expertise from the retail space as well, and we do create a lot of our own original content. We have a team that create reports and bring together everything we're hearing into one place, and we work with a lot of partners to bring in fresh research for us as well. So really making sure that we're a place that things happen at Shoptalk that don't happen elsewhere, to really make sure that it's a worthwhile experience for everyone.
And I think you mentioned it earlier before, you have 92% approval rating on the meetings. I'm assuming when you first started, it likely wasn't that high. So how did you take in feedback and actually iterate one of your core products to make it super valuable? Like how do you guys look at just feedback in general and apply it?
So we do a very big survey coming out of the show. So we open that as delegates are leaving the events, and we typically get really, really good participation in that, actually. So we work very, very hard, and we push very hard to get really, really confident feedback, so that we have. Typically, it's about a third of our audience will participate. So actually, we have a sample size from Shoptalk, for example, of about 3,500 people who filled in our survey this year. So, it's a really, really robust sample size that we have to tell us everything from, which speakers they found valuable, to how they found the food, to, who they want to hear from next, to what was missing, to, are they going to come back again in the future, and everything in between. So that's kind of our first data point that we use. When it comes to the meetings themselves, people provide feedback on every single meeting they have. So not written feedback typically, but for every meeting they have, comes up in the app, is it a good, bad? Will you be following up? So we again know when we've created opportunities to where both participants will be following up with one another afterwards. So again, we've got really, really good metrics to be able to say this type of meeting typically results in a follow-up afterwards, or these types of meetings are typically resulting in lower satisfaction rates, for example, that allow us to then really get into the fine detail and tweak and modify. And then we work with our delegates all through the year as well. So like I say, we have this really fantastic attendee experience team who kind of guide our delegates through their journey at Shoptalk. And what they are able to do is really, have individual conversations with virtually every person who's coming on site to really get a feel for what they're trying to achieve, how easy they're finding it to do, all of those bits and pieces that allow us to shape in the run up to the show, but then also allow us to take that away and build better next time. I mean, it's one of those strange things about events world actually, is that, cyclical nature of it, that we only really get one shot a year to get it right on each show. We obviously do learn and pivot in between the shows that we do as well. But for any given moment, we kind of, we only get one shot to get it right. So we really, really pay attention to our customers' feedback.
We chatted a bit earlier about how vendors or like service providers could maximize their experience. In your experience, what's the best way for actual retailers to maximize their experience? Like, where have you seen when you've heard feedback? What are kind of some of the things that these retailers do to maximize the value that they get out of the shows?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's the same for both sides. And it's really doing your homework and making your schedule, I think, which sounds like very prosaic advice. But I do think it's the biggest drop-off point that we see is for people who are coming for the first time. So it's very typical in events, actually, that, if you can get somebody to come back one more time and they are that much more experienced in how it works, then, they'll typically come back again and again and again. But it's really making sure that the first entry point that they have with you is a positive one. That's the real pressure point. And so it's really about making sure we put a lot of effort. We have a whole program for first-time attendees actually on the retailer and brand side that really, really helps them work through making sure that they hit the ground running, because it's fast. 3 days goes very quickly in Shoptalk world. So what we want to make sure is that people, the retailers in our audience, are really ready to hit the ground running, and we have a whole team that's there to help them make sure that they do that. But what you don't want is somebody to kind of lose half a day on working out, how does this meetings thing work, or where am I meant to be, or am I allowed to go into this session, or any of those kinds of things. So we put quite a big infrastructure in place for those people to make sure that they really come in and get value from maybe not minute 1, but maybe minute 30. So it's really just about for anybody coming to the show, and in any capacity, I would say it's really just about making sure that you've done your homework and you know which speakers you want to hit, who you want to meet, which evening events are going to be valuable to you, and making use of all the resources you have at your disposal to do that. So the Shoptalk team being the primary one of, really, really allowing us to take some of the heavy lifting for you if we can.
And Sophie, as we look to wrap up, I'm curious, under your leadership now, where do you plan to take the brand? What are some of your kind of aspirations for Shoptalk?
It's a really good question. So we have a couple of exciting new bits and pieces coming up in the next year or so, just over a year. If I look ahead to the next 18 months, we've got 2 new launches that we're doing. So the first one is a really exciting one. We're launching a retail media show called The New Markets, which is going to be part of Shoptalk Spring this year. But then after that will be a separate show on its own. So we were very conscious of the fact that retail media doesn't really have a home yet. It doesn't have somewhere for that community to come together. So that's a very exciting one for us to bring together that community as part of Shoptalk Spring. So that's a heads up. And then we will actually be in about a month's time, maybe just over. We're going to be announcing a brand new launch, which I don't know if I can trail it properly yet. I probably can't. I'll get in trouble if I do. But we will be launching a new Shoptalk show in a new region in early 2026. So we've got the team working on that very hard. It's going to be a very exciting one. So, but yeah, I think for us, it's really about being there for retailers and brands around the world and helping them innovate and helping those incredible tech partners find them. So wherever they need us, that's kind of, we're trying to work out where they need us. And then when they need us, we'll be there.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for your time, Sophie. This was super insightful. Like I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of the Shoptalk. We started off with one, and then we ended up doing all three this year, including the Chicago one that's coming up. So we are definitely huge supporters, and appreciate your time and your insight, and congratulations so far on all the success you've had.
Right, very much. Well, we're very much looking forward to seeing you in Chicago.
Absolutely.
The e-commerce toolbox expert perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox expert perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.